For my critical reflection, I have chosen to use a lesson draft that I've prepared for a Year 7 PDHPE lesson, which would have been held on the 20th of the 4th, 2016 at 1pm until 2:10pm. This lesson would go for a complete total of 1 hour and 10 minutes and uses syllabus outcome 4.7. A student identifies the consequences of risk behaviours and describes strategies to minimise harm, whilst delving particularly into exploring risks. The purpose for this lesson is to teach the students the definition of risks and what risk-taking is, whilst also placing heavy importance of why we need to take risk-taking behaviours and the seriousness behind each risk-taking behaviour. By directing the students in their learning so that they are able to understand that taking risk can result in one of two ways. It can be successful and can pay off, or it can fail and the risk taker can suffer the expected consequences that apply to that behaviour. For students to holistically understand when a risk is worth taking, students must evaluate two important points: when it is logical or a necessary risk to take, or if the risk is worth the reward of that risk-taking behaviour to the student. By critically analysing these 2 points, students can learn how to make their own judgments in regards to risk-taking behaviour. The lesson's focal point will indicate to students the strongest factor that should affect their decision making. The first being, what are the chances of the risk coming off? Next, by rating the risk negative consequences of the failure of the risk in comparison to the possible benefits of the risk actually paying off. In planning of the classroom lesson, there was a strong emphasis placed on Piaget's theory of cognitive development, and due to the year being taught being 7th grade, the theory is focused on stage 4, formal operations period. As the students are of the age to exhibit the ability to critically think outside the boundaries of objective realities, the students are given a chance to hypothetically interpret and measurable numbers of plausible realities which are outlined by Krauss, Deschner and Boschner. This theory is specifically focused on the first activity when students are asked not to open the envelope that is sitting in front of them. Whilst the activity is one that emphasises the direct outcomes of taking risks, it also challenges students to think about the various risks and chances of being found out if they are taking, which uses deductive reasoning within themselves. In choosing the next activity, I chose to use the theory of constructivism that focuses on a team-styled learning development, which is why I decided to implement a discussion which would require the students to identify when they had taken a risk, the definition of risk, and what they already know about risks. By having a broad range of topics, this would increase the students' ability to contribute to the discussion, and once a student relays a risky situation of their own, other students would take confidence through social constructivism and want to tell their own story too. Whilst this activity is clearly more aligned with social constructivism, as this theory disregards the thought that the individual is solely responsible for learning, placing significance on social interactions that outline cognitive development and is essential in learning. The behaviourist approach is vital in the lesson, as the teacher is encouraged, as in every single lesson, to observe and analyse the causes and consequences for each event in the classroom. When students are presented with a new activity or role in the classroom, an antecedent follows that change in the classroom, which is an event that precedes behaviour. By observing the classroom and distinguishing why students respond completely different to other students in the classroom in different activity scenarios, the teacher learns the most they can about each individual student's likes and dislikes, their preferred teaching styles, and what they are comfortable and not comfortable doing. By observing these antecedents and consequences in the classroom, it is a valued way to learn about your students' qualities. Now, referring back to the envelope activity, there is an explicit correlation with Pavlov's classical conditioning theory. When the students are presented with an unconditioned stimulus, being the unopened envelope that is specifically for the individual student, they obviously have an unconditioned stimulus that would be to go ahead and open the envelope. But the idea of this activity is to stop that curiosity from controlling the unconditioned response and attempt to turn it into a conditioned stimulus and response. The students know that they cannot open the envelopes until the end of the lesson, which would be achieving the stimulus discrimination by purposely waiting until the completion of that lesson for opening the envelopes, as well as the purpose of the activity being weighing up the pros and cons of taking risks. In summary of the lesson plan, I believe that I created a well-planned lesson which would become very handy in a disruptive or high-pressure classroom, whilst keeping the lesson less intrusive to the students to minimise embarrassment or hostility. By being assertive in teaching this lesson and keeping the activities on track, I really believe that this lesson would cater to the diversity of learners that could potentially be my class. Especially by being an aware teacher, by keeping an eye out on students that may be struggling with the work or facing any other difficulties at the time. The way I would measure if the students found them effective or enjoyable would be simply by reflecting in subsequent lessons and asking the students to rank the activities or lessons they had completed throughout the week. And to comprehend whether students may have thought the lesson could be a strong and successful lesson, we could do this through by assessing the individual and group work that had been collected throughout the lesson.